Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roche Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, a firing has happened in college basketball as the Ole Miss Rebels have decided to fire head coach Kermit Davis. I'm going to go over Ole Miss's decision to fire Kermit Davis and whether I think they made the right decision or not. Now, Ole Miss basketball has been a program for a long time and has really struggled. And Kermit Davis, he was hired 5 years ago to be their head coach, to turn things around and make the Rebels a better basketball team. And he had a lot of success as the Middle Tennessee State head coach, putting up a great record as the head coach of the Blue Raiders. And overall, a lot of Ole Miss fans thought that possibly this would be a good hire because Kermit Davis was a long-time experienced head coach, and he would be able to come to Ole Miss in the SEC and potentially be able to do some good things as the Ole Miss head coach. But unfortunately, things have not worked out, and Ole Miss has decided to fire Kermit Davis. And if you look at Kermit Davis's record as a head coach, he started out at Idaho in 1988, and he was their head coach for 2 seasons, and he put up a 50-12 record, and they made the NCAA tournament both years. And then he became the Texas A&M head coach for 1 season, and he went 8-21, so that didn't last long. And then he became the Idaho head coach again, and he did not have the same success that he had the first time, going 13-17. But then he ended up not being a head coach for a while, and then he became the head coach of the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders. And you see the amount of success that he had with the Blue Raiders over his career. He started out not too well the first few seasons, barely putting up over 500 numbers. But then after the 2010-11 season, things got rolling. And you see from 2011 to 2018, he did fantastic with the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders. They made the NCAA tournament or the NIT every single season except one. And the one year they didn't, they made the CIT. And he was just doing a great job overall with that program. And he put up a record of 332 and 188 once it was all said and done. But those last 7 years of being the head coach of Middle Tennessee State were fantastic for Kermit Davis. And then Ole Miss decided to hire him again because they thought he was an experienced head coach that had a lot of success at a smaller school, and that could translate to the SEC. And you see in his first season in 2018-19, they went 20-13 and 10-8 in the SEC, and they actually made the NCAA tournament, which is the only time that they did make the NCAA tournament under his watch. And then in 2019-2020, they went 15-17. That was definitely a step back. And then in 2020-2021, they went 16-12 and 10-8 in the SEC, and they made the NIT, which is not terrible, but still you want to do better than that. But the last 2 years have just been awful for Kermit Davis. They went 13-19 in 2021-2022 and put up a 4-14 SEC record. And this season so far, Ole Miss was 10-18 and 2-13 in the SEC. And Ole Miss has decided to part ways with Kermit Davis, and he ends his Ole Miss Rebels tenure at 74-79 and 32-55 in the SEC. And basing it off of his record alone, it makes absolute sense why Ole Miss has decided to fire Kermit Davis. Now, on paper, the Ole Miss basketball program does need help because they do have a lot of issues trying to get players into their program. Kermit Davis had some solid players throughout his tenure as the Ole Miss Rebels head coach. They had Devontae Shuler. He was a really solid player for a few seasons. And Terrence Davis, he was a senior in Kermit Davis's first season as the Ole Miss head coach, and that was the year they made the NCAA tournament, and Terrence Davis has been a solid pro. But they also had other players like Blake Henson and Jarkel Joyner transfer away from Ole Miss and go to other programs, and that's really hurt over Kermit Davis's tenure at Ole Miss because he was not able to keep the best players that he had, and they just did not have enough great players overall. And Ole Miss is going to have to do a better job in the future with whoever they get as head coach and being able to recruit and be able to get players through the transfer portal themselves with the new NIL landscape in college basketball. Because even though Kermit Davis, I'm not saying did a really good job as the Ole Miss head coach, he did not have the most talent on his team either, and I don't know if Ole Miss was in a position to help Kermit Davis in that regard because they're just so far behind in the basketball landscape anyway of being able to bring in really good players through the portal and through high school recruiting. They're just way behind some of the better programs in the SEC. So overall, I understand why Ole Miss is firing Kermit Davis. He had a below 500 record. He did not do the best job as the Ole Miss head coach, even though he did try, but he just did not have the best players on his roster. And the best players that Ole Miss did have, they ended up transferring away from the program. They just did not believe in Kermit Davis and Ole Miss to be able to get them where they wanted to go into the NBA and to make NCAA tournaments. And I think overall for Ole Miss, this is a 50-50 thing where it's halfway on Kermit Davis because he didn't do the best job that he could have done at coaching. But it's also just because Ole Miss doesn't have the resources to be able to bring in players and to be able to build their basketball program to have a much better team. So for Ole Miss, whoever they hire as their next head coach, they're going to have to do a better job of being able to bring in more talent into the program through the transfer portal and high school recruiting, or the next coach is going to end up like Kermit Davis. And I do think that Kermit Davis was a solid coach. He had a great run at Middle Tennessee State, especially in his last 7 years, but he just wasn't able to replicate that at Ole Miss for a variety of reasons. And I definitely understand why Ole Miss is firing Kermit Davis. It makes a lot of sense. He just wasn't having a lot of success, and he'd been there long enough. And I completely understand the Rebels for firing him. But for Ole Miss, their next head coach is going to have to get a lot more support, because if not, then their next head coach will end up being fired just like Kermit Davis was. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about Ole Miss firing Kermit Davis, whether you think the Rebels made the right decision, and whether you think Ole Miss needs to do more for their next head coach so he won't get fired as well. And I will see you next time.